about second breakfast.
Time for second breakfast.
What's up, everybody? Monster from Breakdowns for Breakfast here with another episode of Second Breakfast. Today, I wanted to talk about Beavis and Butthead. I grew up in the 90s, so I watched this show a lot, usually with my dad. Usually it was one of those things where, like, mom went to bed, dad was awake, we were hanging out, and he'd be like, hey, go, let's watch something. And we would end up watching Beavis and Butthead. And I loved this show as a kid. I still love it today. I think it's one of those shows that is very, you can take it for what it is on the surface as a crude, nasty, almost offensive kind of show. But if you actually think about it and actually kind of get under the surface, there's a lot going on there. And it's a lot smarter than it looks at first glance. But I remember sitting there late at night watching this with my dad. And I've talked about this on the show plenty of times. I bring up my dad all the time. But stuff was so much funnier when he was sitting next to you giggling and cracking up. So I know him enjoying it made me enjoy it that much more. But a long time ago, I did some research into Beavis and Butthead and the creator, Mike Judge. And I had these notes lying around, and I thought this would be a good time to talk about this because as of recording this, late August 2025, they've just released, they either just announced new episodes or they've actually started releasing new episodes. So even though this little sideshow from the 90s on MTV is now still being produced in 2025, 30 some years later. So I thought, you know what? If you've never seen, well, okay, you've seen the show. If you're somebody that listens to podcasts about metal bands, there's a good chance you've watched some Beavis and Butthead in your time. So, but if you haven't, really thought about how it got started or anything about Mike Judge, I thought, hey, especially with some new episodes coming out, why not do a quick little deep dive into it? So here we go. Mike Judge is the creator of Beavis and Butthead. So I'm going to start with a little bit about his life. Mike Judge was born in 1962 in, and I am going to say this wrong, I'm sorry, it is Guayaquil. It's the largest city in Ecuador. So if we have any Ecuadorian listeners, I apologize. His parents were expatriate Americans. Now, I had to look that up because I didn't know what that meant. It's not like expatriate. I might even be pronouncing it wrong. I'm not sure. But it just essentially means that they are American citizens who live outside of the United States. Judge's father was an archaeologist and his mother was a librarian. But they moved back to America in 1969 and lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 1985, well, let me just say, Mike is going to school. I didn't see anything super noticeable about his life until in 1985, Mike Judge graduated college with a degree in physics. He got a job in engineering, but he didn't enjoy it. He had other jobs, including one with a company called Parallax Graphics in Silicon Valley, but he knew that wasn't the type of career he wanted. He was also a musician. I saw that he began playing bass with this blues guitar player named Anson Funderburg. I'm not exactly sure, but I have looked at some of his videos on YouTube. Solid, talented blues guitarist. If you like blues guitar work, Anson's fantastic. But during this time, Judge went to the University of Dallas. And while he was there, he attended an animation festival. And he became kind of obsessed with some of the artists there. And looking at the work, he called it a life-changing experience. I think it was the first time that he had seen art that could actually be done in a way, like a lucrative way, a way to actually sustain a living making art. After that festival, he bought himself a 16mm camera and started to work on his first animated short, which happened to be titled Milton's Office Space, which you can look this up on YouTube. But if that name sounds familiar, it's because it's the basis for the film Office Space, which Mike Judge did right. But in that short, you can already see the animation style that would sort of become what Beavis and Butthead was known for. So in 1991, after he made his short, he started reaching out to television stations and animation festivals. A week later, Comedy Central called him back, and the Office Space short was aired on Comedy Central. However, in 1992, Judge saw a show on MTV called Liquid Television. It was an animated variety show that had quick animated shorts, usually done by underground artists. Some of the shorts featured on Liquid Television would become their own shows, such as Aeon Flux and, of course, Beavis and Butthead. If you've never seen Liquid Television, that was a really cool show. It was basically like a variety show, but for animation. And sometimes things were funny, sometimes they were gross, sometimes they were action-oriented. Like, Aeon Flux is very, like, anime-style science fiction kind of stuff. And the series that it spawned was pretty good. I don't know what to say about that movie with, I believe it was Charlize Theron. I've seen it, I probably own it, but yeah, not great. So anyway, so he made a few shorts for Liquid Television. But the short that became the biggest hit was called Frog Baseball. And this was the introduction of Beavis and Butthead. Both characters' voices were based on kids that Mike Judge knew back in school. So this is kind of wild. Judge sold the rights to Beavis and Butthead to MTV for around $18,000. But what's kind of interesting about it is they didn't take the show away from him. They basically like kept him on to work. And so eventually Judge was able to get his rights back. And now he owns the Beavis and Butthead IP 50-50 with MTV. So what's kind of interesting about that is usually when an artist sells their IP or a band sells their catalog, they sort of lose the rights to do anything with it without the permission of whoever now owns the rights. But in MTV's case, they basically said, we own it, but it's your thing. You can still work on it. And eventually Judge said, you know what? This is my thing. I want as much of it as I can have. So 50-50 is pretty fair, especially with, you know, how much money this has probably made over the years. So Frog Baseball did so well, they did another short for Liquid Television, and then MTV offered Judge a series spanning 65 episodes. Now, Judge was self-taught. He never tried to mass produce on a scale like this before. So by the time the series was slotted to air, he only completed 2 of the 65 episodes. So what do? They just kept replaying the same 2 episodes over and over, and the ratings kept going up and up. So almost immediately, MTV started getting calls from companies wanting to license the IP, and there was even talks about a live action film being made that would have been similar to Wayne's World. And to be honest with you, at this point in 2025, with the way they do, you know, these kind of legacy sequels and all these like IP brand, you know, whatevers, I'm kind of shocked they've never done a live action Beavis and Butthead. But you know what? It's only 2025. It could possibly still happen. I think I've even seen some memes where Benedict Cumberbatch is one of them. In all fairness, he could. I think the one I saw was Benedict Cumberbatch as Butthead and Neil Patrick Harris as Beavis. And I'm not going to lie, that sounds hilarious. That would probably be great. So, most episodes, if you've never seen Beavis and Butthead before, which I'm sure you have, but most episodes find the duo going on adventures that usually involve vandalism, sexist comments, and just generally missing the point of everything around them. But the thing is it's entirely satirical. It's a portrayal of teenagers in the 90s. And if you were a teenager in the 90s or just a kid in the 90s, it was one of those things where you could relate to it because you sort of knew people like that, but then there was also days where you were kind of like them in a certain way. So it worked on multiple levels. And I think older people, like in their 20s and 30s, also got a lot of enjoyment out of it, like my dad, because he saw teenagers in that light sometimes. So it worked on multiple levels. But the other really cool part about the show is they would also watch music videos and have commentary on them. And what's crazy is I really do feel like this had a bigger impact on music as a whole than I think a lot of people are willing to like admit. Because this was a way for a lot of, especially rock and metal bands, would get their music videos on MTV. And, you know, sure, that's huge and helpful. But then to have it on Beavis and Butthead, where they actually like commentate and make silly comments, I think it just adds to the, you know, fun. One of my favorites was they do This Love by Pantera, and there's kind of an on-running gag about how much they love Pantera. But there's a part where I think it's Beavis, he says, that Pantera guy must have got his ass kicked by his dad a lot. I thought that was pretty good. But I really do feel like this was the beginning of stuff like what Me and Danger do. You know, Beavis and Butthead were the first two music critics to just be two jackasses sitting on a couch telling you their opinions about music. It's like looking in the mirror with Me and Danger. I digress. So in 1994, Marvel Comics published a line of Beavis and Butthead under the Marvel imprint, Marvel Absurd. It ran from 1994 through 1996, and then on December 20th, 1996, they released a feature-length film entitled Beavis and Butthead Do America. The film debuted at number 1 at the U.S. box office and grossed $63.1 million on a $12 million budget. That, my friends, is a return. And what's kind of crazy is there was a lot of pretty well-known people that did voices for this movie. Bruce Willis, Demi Moore, Cloris Leachman, and there's a really funny little side note, David Letterman. But he was credited in the credits as Earl Hoffert. Go figure. So, obviously, if you know anything about Beavis and Butthead and just MTV in the 90s, there was also some controversies. There was some people that tried blaming the show for the death of their 2-year-old daughter in Ohio. Her 5-year-old brother set their mobile home on fire using a cigarette lighter. The mother later claimed that her son was watching an episode of Beavis and Butthead where they said fire was fun. It was later revealed that the family didn't have cable television and the child probably never saw that. However, this did prompt MTV to back up the time slot. I don't remember exactly what it was, but this is when they started showing it at 11 p.m. And they put a disclaimer before each episode. Now, I love these. I love these disclaimers. So this was the first one. It said, Beavis and Butthead are not real. They are stupid cartoon people completely made up by this Texas guy whom we hardly even know. Beavis and Butthead are dumb, crude, thoughtless, ugly, sexist, self-destructive fools. But for some reason, the little wiener heads make us laugh. They could have kept that, but they eventually changed it to Beavis and Butthead are not role models. They're not even human. They're cartoons. Some of the things they do cause a person to get hurt, expelled, arrested, or possibly deported. To put it another way, don't try this at home. So that was their way of kind of getting around it. A couple of funny little side bits about the show. Their names were mispronounced by South Carolina Democratic Senator Fritz Hollings as Buffcoat and Beaver. And this actually made its way into a running gag on the show where adults would constantly mispronounce their name. Some of the other ones, Tom Anderson, who's a side character who would later on evolve into the character of Hank Hill for King of the Hill, which also at time of recording this is also getting a reboot, rebrand, re-kick up, whatever you want to call it. But Tom Anderson used to call them Butthole and Joe, which I thought was pretty good. And he often claimed that they were of Asian ethnicity. So go figure there. There was also Penis and Butt Munch. And then there's a pretty good one where Bill Clinton calls them Beavis and Bumhead. And And then in the old lady in the movie, which was played by Cloris Leachman, she calls him Travis and Bobhead. Another really good one was in the episode Incognito. They pretend to be foreign exchange students and go by the names Crevice and Bunghead. The bully sees through the disguises and calls them Beaver and Buttplug. And then, there's another one where they go on the Gus Baker show, which is a kind of a lampooning of Rush Limbaugh, who was a big conservative speaker back in those days. And that's when he calls them Beaver and Buffcoat again. So, like I mentioned already, Tom Anderson was one of many secondary characters on Beavis and Butthead, and he eventually became the inspiration for the show King of the Hill. But there was a lot of other fun characters. You had Principal McVickers, who was like always depicted as this like furious ex-military guy. He was always like shaking and using profanity. And then there was Coach Buzzcut. Actually, I'm mixing the two up. Principal McVickers was kind of a fat guy, but he was always shaking and angry. And then Coach Buzzcut was the one that was like ex-military, and he was like a real hard ass. Todd was the bully. That was funny. He used to beat up Beavis and Butthead, but they like looked up to him and wanted to like be in his gang and stuff. And Stewart was the little fat kid that used to try to hang around Beavis and Butthead. And talking about the cultural impact of Beavis and Butthead on music in general, if you remember the show, Stewart used to wear a Winger t-shirt. And they kind of like, I think Butthead had the AC/DC shirt, Beavis had the Metallica shirt, and then the little loser kid, Stewart, is wearing a Winger shirt. So I've seen in interviews where the guys from Winger basically said like, yeah, that hurt our career because it's got like the little doofy kid that nobody likes wearing our shirt, and it's sort of like painted them as like kind of wimpy or whatever. So it's funny how it really did make a difference what they were doing on this stupid cartoon show. And then also really liked Mr. Van Driesen. He was their teacher, and he was he's got long hair and he's all like flower power hippie guy. And so that was kind of fun. Now I mentioned Hank, King of the Hill, Tom Anderson becoming Hank Hill. And it's basically kind of just Mike Judge's life in Texas, kind of, but it's a slower pace kind of show. But also, and this one's not around anymore, but if you were in the 90s, you'll probably remember the other spinoff from Beavis and Butthead, which was Daria. Now, Daria was pretty cool because she was sort of a, I don't want to say like Wednesday Addams is now, but she was like the cool alternative chick. And so they made a spinoff show with her in it, and it was really cool too. I really thought it was a lot of fun, and really liked watching that one too. So in the original run, it ran for 7 seasons from 1993 to 1997. It did have an 8th season in 2011. And then some more episodes in 2022 for Paramount Plus, including a new movie, Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. I have not seen the movie, and I have not seen a lot of these newer episodes. And like I said, as of recording this, end of August 2025, they're making brand new episodes. So this is still going on 30 years later, just to show you how impactful it's been. Now, bringing it back to the music thing. As a guy with a podcast that talks to his buddy about music and makes crude jokes along the way, I mean, how are we not influenced by Beavis and Butthead? And it's just crazy to me that this little show made by this one guy about these two idiots has gone on to become so culturally impactful in so many ways, on not just music, but on animation, on comedy, on MTV in general. Because, around the early 90s is sort of when MTV started to get away from just music videos and start getting more into pop culture things. So I think if you've never watched Beavis and Butthead, I highly recommend watching the first few seasons. I'm sure some of the newer stuff is still really funny too. I actually have that first 7 seasons on DVD, which that's how much I liked them. And what's kind of fun is they don't have, for whatever rights issues or legal issues, I guess, maybe there's other reasons, I don't know, but the music videos are not in the episodes anymore, but they have a collection of them on the like bonus discs for each box set. So the music videos are there. Plus you can just go to YouTube and look it up. But yeah, I highly recommend going back and watching some of those old ones. They still hold up. I'm sure the new ones are good. I'm going to watch the new movie, They Do the Universe, because I have not seen that one yet. Do America's Great. So anyway, did you love Beavis and Butthead growing up? Do you love Beavis and Butthead now? Do you think watching Beavis and Butthead ruined your future as an adult? It could have impacted mine. I mean, I'm sitting in a room by myself yelling at a microphone about cartoons and music. So who knows? But reach out, leave us a comment, send us an email, breakdownsbreakfast@gmail.com. No, breakdownsbreakfast@gmail.com. There we go. And hope you have a great day.